What is up, guys? So today we are here with Chris Middleton, and we are going to be talking about. We had a poll out on my social media, and we asked people if you had to spend 1 hour, or if you had to spend money for 1 hour to talk to a tax professional, what would you ask? And 70% did ask for small business questions. So let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And Chris, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, Chris Middleton, co-founder of MakeTaxesFair.com, and I've been a tax professional for 18 years, helping people with taxes. Over the last probably 6 to 7, I've morphed into more of a tax strategist, to helping people instead of just giving advice and saying, "Hey, go do this to save money on taxes," but actually helping people to execute on that advice and say, how can I give you advice that's actionable, that you can internalize and take action on?
And what led you there?
I, like I said, have been doing been in the tax world for, several years at that point. And I had people that used to come to me and say, "Hey, Chris, this is stupid. I'm paying too much money in taxes." And I'd be like, "You're right." So here's what you should do. And just off the cuff, try to provide some advice and support. And they were like taking a bunch of notes and they're like, "This is amazing." Like, cool. So I'd feel good, but they'd walk away from my desk and I'd see them the next year and I'd be like, "Hey, I remember we talked about X, Y, and Z. What happened? And haven't heard from you." And they're like, "Yeah, got busy with the family, got slammed at the business. They never took action." And so I was sitting there thinking, I'm not helping my people, right? I love what I do. I feel like I'm helping people in a meaningful way, and the tax stuff doesn't scare me. I like it. I'm one of those weird people. And so, I just was like, I'm not helping people the way that they need to be served and helped. So I said, the accounting model's broken. There's got to be a better way. And so I really started to think critically about how do you help people and give them advice, but not just advice, but that you're going to take action. Because knowledge, they always say knowledge is power. I call it baloney. I'm like, knowledge is not power. Knowledge applied, that's real power.
Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time that we met and I saw you up on stage, that was the biggest thing that you were talking about was you can sit here, you can listen to me talk, and I can give you as much information as possible. But the ones that are really going to benefit from this are those who take what I have to say and actually implement it on a day-to-day basis in your own business.
Yep. Have you heard of, I'm writing a book right now, and the chapter I'm working on is overcoming the biggest hurdle to tax savings, which is you. We're our biggest roadblock. And have you ever heard of the 100-hour rule?
No, what's that?
So the 100-hour rule, if you take 100 hours and break it down over a year, that's 18 minutes a day. If you spend 18 minutes a day on any discipline, anything that you choose, whether it's playing the piano, optimizing your marketing tactics, optimizing your taxes, if you spend 18 minutes a day consistently at the end of that year, you will have spent 100 hours and you will statistically be better than 95% of the population of the planet at that one thing.
Gotcha. So just take 18 minutes a day.
18 minutes a day. Yep. And I have a guy right now I'm working with. He's self-employed. He has his own business. He's traditionally been paying around $30,000 to $35,000 a year in taxes. Like, he's pretty consistent. And I just last week met with him and told him, "Hey, you're going to get at where we're tracking with the implementation of the changes that I've told him to make. We're going to make his tax bill go from about $35,000 to getting a small refund, about $3,000. He started to cry. He was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And we have spent together, I was like, "Hey, Nate, how much time have we spent together this year?" And we went through it, and he's like, "Yeah, we've spent about 10 hours together." And I'm like, "Bro, that's a delta of almost $30,000 in taxes with a 10-hour. By the time we get to the end of the year, we will have spent maybe 15 hours. That's a killer ROI." So just some time with me on a monthly basis and my team, and then the back end implementation of doing the work, and he's seen a monster change in his life. Like that's real money to him that he's like, holy cow, that's crazy.
So for me, it sounds like the biggest takeaway is it's not about how much time you spend on it, but it's about how much time you spend thinking about it and then implementing on it.
Yeah, action,
Yeah.
taking action. And that's the biggest hurdle. So my model that I tell people, I call it the 4 E's. I say you need education. You need to know what you don't know, right? In a clear, concise manner. And that's what we work to do. Can I talk about my newsletter?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So with the education component, we're dropping a monthly newsletter, free to the planet. So if you're self-employed, you need this, because we're going to say, here are the 2 things you need to do this month in November. We're recording in November right now, right? So here are the 2 things you need to do in November, December, January, February to optimize your taxes. So it's not this laundry list of where you sit down with your accountant one time a year and they're like, hey, do these 10 things. And you're like, cool, I'm not going to do any of that because it's overwhelming. Here are the 2 things you need to do right now. So there's the education component. With that, I say the next step is evaluation, right? You can tell me, I know what I need to do to lose the dad bod, right? I know what I need to do. I just haven't fully internalized that. I haven't evaluated and said, oh, if I do this in this manner, it's going to impact me in this way. So the evaluation is really key. And once you do that, once you have the education with the evaluation component to connect it to you, now you're primed and ready for execution. So if you do that, get education, evaluate that, how does that apply to me? Execute, take those specific steps that you need to take. Now you're going to achieve efficiency. So those are my educate, evaluate, execute to obtain efficiency.
Yeah, and I think that's brilliant because once someone sees how it applies to them specifically, that's when they're more willing to do action because it's definitely more emotionally involved with them.
Right. And I was a psychology major in school before I switched to accounting.
I'll watch what I say then.
Yeah, I didn't get that far into the program, but by no means. I just decided I didn't want to deal with crazy people. No offense to anybody out there, but dealing with real life things. But I was just like, that's not what I want to do. The joke is, I say now I deal with people's taxes, and money makes them crazy. So here I am back dealing with crazy people.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like any business nowadays, everyone's a psychologist, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well,
there's the psychology of being self-employed. Stanford a few years ago did a study. Do you know what the number one struggle that business owners face?
What?
Loneliness.
No way.
Loneliness. If you're in your own head trying to solve all these problems, sometimes you may or may not have a spouse who is frustrated with self-employment. I mean, I've been married and working late nights, and I know my ex was like, why are you working? I'm like, I got stuff to do, right? So you feel like you're alone in this way. And so, that can get overwhelming. And then if you have all these things that are piling on, you've got 1,000 problems to solve, you're trying to solve them. And then on top of that, you're trying to deal with, oh my God, how do I deal with the tax bill, right? So if you can take the mountain that's before you and say, I'm going to take one step at a time, I'm going to tackle this one thing right now, 18 minutes, not that big of a deal. And then before you know it, you've achieved optimization if you're doing the right things during that 18 minutes. That's the key.
So my question for you then is, you had this problem before. Everyone has this problem of loneliness. We all have this problem. You've had it before. You're obviously solving it now. How did you overcome that?
I'm a networker. I'm a people person.
Yeah, you are.
For an accountant, people are like, you're kind of bubbly for an accountant. I'm like, yeah, I'm this weird dude that happens to like the tax stuff. But I'm a people person first. And so I'm always looking to network and reach out and give, and rising tides lift all ships. I'm full of quotes today, boy.
Yeah.
I mean, rising tides lift all ships, right? So I have somebody that I'm helping right now, I can't serve them, but because I know a little bit about their issue that they're dealing with, I'm like, yeah, you don't need a dabbler. I'm a dabbler in that field. You need somebody that's an expert. So let me find an expert for you. And I'm taking a little bit longer than I'd like to find the expert. Like I'm interviewing kind of because I need somebody to fill this niche for me anyway. But I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, in the meantime, can you answer a couple questions? Because I might be able to give you some insight now to help you solve the problem is we're looking for a professional to be that solution provider. Those people like that I'm helping right now, I haven't billed them anything. I've given them some of my time. They are now in the process of integrating me into their onboarding process for their clients. Like they're like, oh my God, you give it two. Can I swear?
Go for it.
You give two shits about my business. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you guys are great people. You do great work. I'm super blessed to know you. You're part of my network. And, I'm like, how can I help you? Right now, that networking and the desire to genuinely help, like the book, The Go Giver, if you ever read that, phenomenal book. Just be genuinely interested in helping people. People feel that. And that's why I think I have found success in what I do, because I'm like, I care about people. It's like I want to help them and I want to do better. I want to be better. I want them to do better. And ultimately, I say when it comes back to the taxes, friends don't let friends overpay the government. So let's pay less legitimately. Morgan Stanley said, you have to pay your fair share, but you don't have to leave a tip.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's the smartest thing that any small business owner does. And that's actually what I asked you too is, hey, a lot of my people are asking for a financial advisor. Who do you know that I can reach out to?
Right. And I have, that's actually a topic, because I've been a financial advisor in the past. I've stepped out of that sandbox. I don't want to play in that sandbox anymore. I want to stay in the tax world. But, when you spend time, again, consistently looking at your business. So the number one thing I would tell people, a radio station called me a few years ago and said, hey, it's tax time. Can you give us some tax tips? And I said, yeah. The number one thing you can do to save money on taxes, it's not sexy, is know your numbers. And a lot of people are like, oh, I made $1 million this year. I'm like, cool. How much did you keep? What do you mean? I made $1 million. I'm like, no, you didn't. Because to make that million, you had advertising, you had expenses, you had software, you had all these things. So you made $1 million, but you netted 10. Good stuff. Like you made less than $1,000 a month. And they're like, oh. So to know your numbers and have those dialed in and to invest in yourself in that way, then you can bring your numbers to somebody like me to say, how do I optimize this? Like, and what do I need to optimize? You had, before we got started, you were kind of asking some questions about LLC, right? Or starting a company or forming a company. So for people that are just looking, because right now we're in I would say some wonky economic times, right? Groceries.
I think we're definitely in some wonky world times.
Oh yes, absolutely. Like you go to the grocery store and you look at the people posting on Facebook and social media, and they're like, here's what $100 got me today versus $100, 3 years ago or whatever, right? The Home Alone. Have you seen the Home Alone meme? Where it's like the craziest thing about the Home Alone thing is that Kevin bought like that many groceries for $20. It's like, what the heck?
Well, I remember watching Cheaper by the Dozen.
Right.
And they were walking out with a full shopping cart. I think it was even 2, and they got rung up for like $50 or $80. And I was like, that is not today's numbers.
No, not today at all. You're like, holy cow. So, a lot of people are to survive and to meet the demands of life. And we live in California. It's expensive here. So a lot of people are starting kind of side hustle things. So the struggle is, okay, I'm starting a business. I need to form an LLC, right? I get that question all the time. I'm like, do you? Let's talk about that. So my biggest piece of advice is, one, starting a business, figure out liability wise. For the record, where's the camera? Yeah, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on Zoom, TV, podcasts. This is not legal advice.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure. Stop and period and stop. Right. But so I always say, if you're concerned, because people say, well, an LLC will protect me liability wise. I'm like, talk to an attorney about that. I think you'd be surprised that it doesn't protect you as much as you think it would. So make a list. What's keeping me up at night, right? In my business, is somebody to sue me? What am I in a high risk business? And if you form an LLC in California, you're signing up for, or a corporation in California, you're signing up for a minimum $800 that you have to pay to the great state of California as a privilege of doing business in California. So $800 can buy you a lot of insurance. That's a lot of money you can put towards a pretty solid insurance policy to protect you against those things that are keeping up you at night. Generally, I say my understanding talking to attorneys is if you're personally negligent, if you do something stupid, you're not going to be protected from insurance or your legal whatever. So be careful about that. And then the other thing is I say, you want to make sure that that side hustle, right, is going to get up and off the ground. So start your business, come out with your MVP, your minimal viable product or production, right? And say, what am I going to sell to people, and are people going to buy it? Cool. If that's the case, if you have that MVP and you're ready to go to give people that service, go at it get your first 30, 50 clients, right? Figure out, is this going to be something I'm going to be able to do and turn into a consistent side hustle or even my main hustle, right? Is this going to be it? When you get to that point where you see some sustainability, now if you've been tracking your numbers, your income, your outflow, and you're like, cool, I made 50 grand, but I spent 45. So I only made 5,000 in the last 6 months. Is that going to justify the need to set up an LLC? You're going to incur additional costs for tax preparation. You're going to incur that $800 bill to the state, all kinds of things. So get your business up and running, get your numbers set, and then come to somebody and say, hey, at what point does it make sense to flip the switch and say, hey, I want to form a corporation?
Now, for someone who's starting a new business and they want to collect funds or payment, how would you suggest them initially?
As far as like payments for services?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So, Square, like there's a lot of really good, there's local payment processors. I know some people that are kind of local that do payment processing. Out the gate, I just say, simple, fast, done is better than perfect, right? Get it done. So Square, Clover, different, some of those vendors are cheap and easy to start like right now, right away. And then as you graduate, go to the next level, say, okay, what is there a more efficient way I can do this? Is there a more cost-effective way? Some of those systems cost more on the front end, or they want to see you doing kind of a certain volume, but having those conversations. But when I started my business, I just got in and said, cool, I'm going to use Square. And I've been using Square for a long time and migrated to another platform now with my other business. But, that's where I started.
Gotcha. And so for using Square and anything like that, do you need like a business account? And also, do you need like the articles of
Good
corporation?
question. So if you form an LLC, you'll need the articles of incorporation stuff. If you just say, hey, I'm going to get my business going up and off the ground, I'm going to start selling and see are people picking up what I'm putting down, right? Are they buying from me? If that's the case, you could just form a sole proprietor.
Gotcha.
Say, hey, I don't need any paperwork. Sole proprietor is the easiest business to form and start up and get going. Very little information needed at the bank, all that. So, on that point, record keeping, I would tell people, if you're starting a side hustle or starting a business, set up a separate bank account. Make your life easier, so much easier to just keep it separate and clean. Develop that habit at the front end now and say, okay, I'm going to use the business for a business account for this, the income and expenses. So if you're at Costco going through the line, right, and you're like, okay, spending the $7,000 at Costco because everything's expensive. Like, oh, I need this item for my business. Act with discipline and segregate and say, hey, it's a pain in the butt. Kids are crying, I know, but got to do separate transactions. Just run it as a separate, say, I need to buy this for my family and then this for the business.
That's the best way to not get mixed in with commingling, right?
Yeah. I had a client reach out to me and she's like, hey, she's being questioned for her 2021 tax return. And I was like, okay, wish she had reached out to me before the morning of. It's like, communicate. But she had commingled, right? Her personal and business and everything. And so it was like, okay, good stuff. Here we are. We're have to segregate out the expenses. what a nightmare. Time, energy, and effort. Do it right the first time. Do it right the first time and save yourself that time later if you're ever questioned.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And since we're in the topic of small businesses, I'm developing a small business. There is a training or some type of travel that I'm occurring now.
Okay.
What's your suggestion on that? Like, what can I use? What can I use as a business expense then?
You're asking, what can I deduct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So there's two tests for, is it a deduction for your business? So one, is it directly related to your business? Yes. So if the answer is, I would not be going there, I would not be incurring that expense, like these really nice cameras you have, microphone, headphone, right? If I wasn't doing this for my business, I wouldn't be buying this. This isn't stuff you have just laying around, right? So ask yourself, is it directly related? If the answer is yes, and it's 100%, it's deductible, right? The second test is it an ordinary and necessary expense? So that means, you're hosting a networking event. Cool. Like you drop $500-600 to have something at a local place, or you rent out a little hall or something, even up to like $2,000. Cool. If you're going and spending $150,000 on a yacht in the San Francisco Bay Area, right? Is that an ordinary and necessary expense? At yours and my level, probably not. We're not baller status, right? If you're at a higher level and you've got, you're making millions of dollars, that could be an ordinary and necessary expense. So you have to look at it in context and say, is this an ordinary and necessary thing? So if you apply those two principles, is it directly related, and is it an ordinary and necessary expense? That's going to tell you, hey, this is tax deductible or not.
Let's say you and me go on a business trip to Anaheim, and we end up going to Disneyland.
Gotcha.
What would that count as?
Yeah. So what would be the business purpose for going to Disneyland?
Networking.
Networking.
Let's say the business development clinic or event that we go to.
Yep.
Everyone's going to Disneyland, and we're there to network.
Yeah. So I have a client, actually, fun fact, he is in Southern California, and he does have a day at Disney. And in his case, it's super unique. In his case, we are counting the day at Disney as a deduction because he pays for it as part of his training program. He pays for it. The only reason we've done this, and we've documented the snot out of this thing, right? His curriculum, 2 days leading up to the Disney event, is all Disney. He's using Disney as a case study. He's talking about Disney all day long for 2 days. They're saying Disney, 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 Disney. This is their business model. This is their business model. How do we mimic that? How do we find that success in our businesses? They go to Disney, they do all the fun stuff, but then during the day, he actually has stops during the day where he's like, okay, let's talk about this. And he gathers them and they're talking business during the day at Disney.
No, that's interesting.
Very curated. He's got a map and he's like, we're going to have this conversation here, this conversation here, this conversation here. Very curated. And then they have another day after the Disney event where they get together and they're talking Disney. It's pretty clearly integrated. Okay. So that's like an extreme example, right? The normal rules for you and I is entertainment is no longer deductible. So if you and I go to a Kings game, the ticket to the Kings game is not deductible. The food is deductible.
Why is that?
So meals are deductible, whether you have them now they're 50%. They're back to the 50% haircut. But meals are deductible whether you have it at the In-N-Out Burger down the street or the Kings game, or if it's a business networking type deal. But the entertainment is not. So you have to split out the cost of the entertainment from the food. So back to the travel thing. So travel is deductible under the rules if you spend at least 4 hours of the day working. So if you and I go to SoCal and we're like, hey, we're going to be looking for some real estate investment deals down there. We're driving around, looking at properties, running comps, that type of thing. Cool. If we're doing that work for 4 hours a day or more, then that's a tax deductible travel day. So the rest of the day we could go play golf, we could go to Disneyland, anything like that, and it would we can't deduct the cost of the Disneyland, but the travel to get down there is deductible.
Gotcha.
I always say pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, and people say, "Oh well, I want to play in the gray area." I'm like, okay, any accountant that says, "Oh, that's a gray area," that means, in my opinion, they don't understand the rules. There's a lot less gray area than you think. There's actually really bright line, pretty well defined rules. You just have to be working with somebody that understands those rules.
What's one of those gray areas that is a gray area?
Oh, yeah.
Something where you're like, that is legitimate. That is a legitimate gray area. I don't specifically have an answer right now, but if push comes to shove, we can go up to bat.
I can't personally think of any places there when when there's new tax law. So you stumped me. Don't edit this out. He stumped me, right? You said what is a legitimate gray area, and I was like, can't really think of any.
Sorry, we're going off the books right now.
Yeah, there's anytime there's a new tax law, and well, earned income credit. Oh, not. I'm sorry, you can edit that out. The employer retention tax credit, ERTC or ERC. You may have
What is that?
that's something that was a COVID era provision. If your business was shut down, or if you were impacted gross receipts wise, your income dropped by a certain percentage, you could be eligible for a tax credit per employee. The 2020 credit was not that great. I forget the amount. I don't deal with the earning or employer retention tax credit a lot. But the 2021 and 2022 credit was like $7,500 per employee. So it was fairly substantial. 70, I think it was like 21,000 for the year. Don't quote me on this.
Yep.
But it was fairly substantial credit. Well, there's a lot of people out there when the employer retention tax credit was released, it's like, hey, here's this monster tax credit, and if your business was affected by COVID in these ways, you could be eligible for this. Cool. So a lot of people started applying for it. A lot of people started pushing. There were what I call pop-up ERC firms or ERC mills that popped up, and you may, if you're listening to this and you have a small business, you probably have been solicited a minimum of 20 to 30 times, right? Saying, hey, you're eligible for the ERC. And are you? The IRS just actually put a moratorium on the ERC tax credit filings because there's a ton of abuse with those. There's a ton of business promoters of the credit that are saying, hey, if you were shut down for COVID, even if it was for a couple months, you could be eligible for this credit. Cool. Actually, that's not how the rules read. And there's a lot of people that are going to end up paying those monster tax credit refunds back with penalties. So that's the IRS is really putting the kibosh on those and halting those credits. So got that. So my point is, tax law, when it's new, that's when there can be gray area because it's the interpretation of, and until it's been challenged and some people have said, oh, that's an interesting, we should, if we approach it this way, we can take this. That would be where there could be gray area.
And I always think it's funny that during COVID, the world kind of shifted, and now the IRS is trying to catch up and block everything and now asking for refunds for everything. And really quickly, for people who are self-employed, how early should they start to file their taxes?
Great question. So I'm of the opinion that if you're working with somebody that is proactive, you should be doing some quarterly, semi-annual, at least once a year outside of your tax filing touch point to say, where are we trending for our tax liability, right? I'm meeting with people now and saying, here's penciling out, here's where we think we're going to be, right? If you have your record keeping, that's not sexy. Again, bringing the record keeping up. You're like, oh, I hate doing my books. Okay, hire somebody else to do them then. Fire yourself from that role, hire yourself somebody else and put yourself in a supervisory role. So if you have your numbers in line, you could be ready to file by middle of February, end of February. The only reason you would delay filing, because you get an extension to file, you don't get an extension to pay. So if you owe tax money, you owe those dollars by April 15th, right? So it's my opinion, get your tax return, get your stuff together, get your information submitted to your accountant, be nice to your accountant. And if you're working with somebody that can set clear expectations, hey, if you get me all your stuff by this date, we'll have your stuff done by this date. That's how my firm operates. You get us your stuff by our deadline, we're going to have it done within this time period. That's what we shoot for.
And with you and your firm, who are your niche clientele and who's your firm's niche clientele?
Yeah, so we work exclusively with business owners. If you call me and say, or talk to me and my team, say, hey, Chris, I'm a homeowner, I have W-2 job, and I'm starting a small business. We'll say, cool. If you're starting a small business, we'll talk to you, right? We'll help you. We're an investment because we help people optimize their taxes and pay less to the government. I always say we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive. I mean, I had somebody that they worked with a tax person on the East Coast, and they were charged $74,000 for the work that they did.
No, that's insane.
Yeah, they saved that person $70,000. So they actually charged their first year savings basically, but the guy was able to capture those savings kind of year after year after year. So he had an ROI. It just took him
More
few
than a
years,
year, yeah.
more than a year to get there, right? So I looked at his case and I was like, yeah, man, we would have charged you like 20. So you would have had the first year, you would have had over a 3 times ROI.
Was that a client acquisition right there?
He was in a weird spot. He had just sold the business. He actually was kind of not doing anything. So I was like, well, I mean, I can work with you, but what am I going to do for you? You're not doing anything right now. So he's like, yeah, that's a fair point. So, we are going to prepare his tax returns, but, he's going to come back to, he's like, okay, when I have people that need your help or when I get back into the game, he's taking a mental break for a couple of years. He had a big exit on a business and he's like, I don't need to work for a few years. So he's like, cool. But yes, the bottom line is I was like, yeah, we would have charged significantly less and gotten the same results, if not better. So to answer your question, we work exclusively with business owners. We are an investment. I want to address something. If you're working with a tax strategy person or somebody that's doing your taxes, one, they need to be licensed. You should be. I had a call from a client from a decade ago, and she dug up my number, and she's like, this person is going to charge us $3,000 for the tax return. They were sole proprietor, like they owned a home. They didn't have a ton going on. They had 2 small businesses. I was like, $3,000, okay. And they're like, yeah, and they're using TurboTax. I was like, oh, really? And I said, so at the bottom of that tax return, does it say self-prepared? And they're like, yeah. And I said, so they're charging you for work. They're not putting their name on it. That's illegal. That gets my goat every time. I'm like, seriously, put your name on the work if you're going to do the work. And I just said, that's a lot for that tax return. I said, our fee would have been around $1,200, so significantly less. Still some work to do there. And she's like, oh, $1,200. I'm like, well, compared to $3,000, yeah, that's, we're much less expensive. But we put our name on the return and we own up to the work that we do, right? But when it comes to tax strategy, right? If somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to charge you 30% of what I can save you, that's called contingency pricing. That's illegal, right? You're not allowed to do that. What you are allowed to do, like with my firm, we have a set fee range. So we have a low, medium, and high complexity kind of fee structure. And we do our due diligence to find out who are you, what's your complexity, how can we save you money? And then based on where you fall into that, we say, okay, we're going to charge X, Y, or Z for our fee range. Our goal is to provide you a minimum of 2x ROI. but we don't come into it thinking, oh, we're going to charge you a flat percentage. So more often than not, when we work with somebody, we determine their case complexity. Are you low, medium, or high complexity? Or there elements where you're low, but you have some medium, so that kind of balances out. And then we say, hey, here's our fee for service. Here's what we're going to be able to save you. So that translates to a 280%, or in some cases, most of the time we're at like 3 to 5x ROI in the first full year.
And how would you distinguish what high, medium, low is?
Yeah, so low complexity case would be somebody, they have one business, the like case I had the other day. Husband's a W-2 employee. They have 3 kids. They own a home. She has a small business. She is the sole member or owner of that business. It's not 2 of them. It's kind of her thing. She runs it, and he weighs in and is her partner in that, from a spousal standpoint. Like, hey, go baby, I got you. Like, supporting her. That's a fairly low complexity case. If you have a high complexity case, I dealt with a client where they had 4 businesses, a minimum of 3 partners per business. So, you have most of the same partners, but there are a couple outside parties. So when you have decisions being made, there was no real clear spokesperson. And so it's like, cool, we're trying to make decisions, and I got to get like 10 people together to make a decision. More people, more businesses, that was a higher complexity case.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there, and then there's elements in between. But when we help people, we walk them through and say, hey, here's the levels of service that we offer. Here's what we offer per service. You tell me, where do you think you are? Most of the time, people, I feel, will put themselves in the space where they're like, oh, I belong in this level, and here's why. Like, I agree with you. Most of the time, though, I'm saying, I think actually you're this complexity, but you have some elements here. So most of the time, I'm like, hey, let's start you at this level and graduate you up, and make sure that we're serving you the way that you need to be served.
That's some good consulting, because it then allows them to put themselves in your shoes, and now they get to agree, you're right, this is where I am, or I really think I'm here, and then you just back it up.
Yeah, it's if you have ever read the book Integrity Selling in the 21st Century?
Mm-mm.
It's by a guy named Ron Willingham. He actually passed away, I think, in 2020. Brilliant man. And he talks about something called the Z curve. So we buy on emotion, not fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so my job as a tax professional is to say, okay, you're here. You want to be here. So right now you're paying 50, 60, 70 grand a year in taxes, but you want to pay less. Okay, so what needs to happen? So it's like, here's all the things that need to happen. So you bring them from current state to future state, and here's all the work that needs to be done. There's a quote I saw: the magic you're seeking is in the work you're avoiding, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, there's work that has to be done. So, okay, that's a hard thing to do. But here's how we make that easy, right? So you go from current state to future state, bring people down. You're like, got to do the work. But here's how we help you with that. So if that makes sense, does it make sense? Can we bless your life? Can we serve you and save you money? If the answer is no, I'm here when you need me, right? We're here when you need us. If the answer is yes, we can help you, but you're not quite at this level, you're like kind of more towards the middle, well, let's serve you there. That's all it comes down to, is let's serve you there and make sure that we're having an impactful meaning in your life. I get to go to bed at night feeling good about what we've done for you. You get to go to bed at night feeling, hey, we're confident in our tax savings because we've done it the right way. We've done the documentation. We've done the work that we need to do. So if we're questioned and we're audited, cool. We'd say, here you go, Uncle Sam. Here's all the paperwork. Here's what we did. Here's why we did it. We're in the rules. Have a nice day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we operate.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty clear cut.
Yeah, you guys sound like the clear winners out here.
We love what we do. Like, we love what we do. And our business, maketaxesfair.com, that's what we're here to do, is to help you make the taxes fair for you. That's it.
And for the small business, self-employed people, what do you feel like, or what do you know is the biggest mistake that they're doing when it comes to their taxes?
Everybody always says when they come to me, they're like, they're frustrated. They're frustrated. And they're frustrated because they're like, I feel like I'm not getting the help I need. I'm like, cool, let's talk about that. So why don't you feel like you're getting the help you need? Well, I reach out to my guy or gal and, they never get back to me. Cool. When are you reaching out to them? Probably during tax time. So the point is people aren't getting the service they need. But do you know who Jocko Wilco, the extreme accountability guy?
Yeah.
Like Navy SEAL. He's like, if you get in a car accident, you get T-boned at a light, it's your fault. I'm like, whoa. And he's like, well, it's your fault because if you're on your way to a meeting and if you had left 5 minutes earlier, you would have been less rushed to get through that light. You would have been less pressure to get there on time. You would have looked both ways to make sure it was clear, and you would have made it through that intersection, right? So that whole extreme accountability. So when I meet with people and I talk to them, at some level, yes, they're professional. They are a busy business owner. Their CPA or accountant's a busy business owner themselves, and they're trying to do the work and keep up. But most accountants are what I would call happy historians. They're taking your information, putting it in the right boxes, reporting your taxes accurately. That's important and needs to be done the right way. But they're not taking any time to examine your fact pattern and say what could change. We, on the other hand, I just was working with my business partner this morning. We're building out our CRM, our client resource management tools, and we're baking into our process a checkpoint on the tax return. So once we've completed the tax return, before we review the tax return with the client, we're saying what are the elements of tax strategy that they're missing. If they're already into one of our maintenance packages, we say, cool, here's what we need. Here's what action we need to take in the next 2 to 3 months. If they're not on our maintenance package, we say, hey, we did your tax return, but we identified there's some areas. So would you like to have a conversation about what it means to get support from us to implement those things? So back to the question, sorry, I like to talk.
No, yeah, you're good.
Back to the question is what's the number one mistake people make? People make the mistake of putting their head in the sand, saying my CPA, my accountant has my back. They're going to handle it. They're going to help me optimize on taxes. When in reality, yes, your poor guy or gal that's doing your taxes, they're doing their absolute best, but it's a collaborative approach. I don't know your business like you know your business. And if you're not engaged in the process, it's just like a personal trainer. You could show up and do the workouts with your personal trainer, but homeboy, if you go back home and eat the package of Oreos, you're eating empty calories and you're not doing the work in the kitchen to match what you're doing with your personal trainer. Same thing goes with your personal finances and with your taxes. If you aren't engaged in the process and collaborating with that professional to do the work, or a member of your team is not doing the work, you're not going to achieve results. So when people come to us and they're like, hey, I need help, I'm like, cool. Are you willing to invest not only time or not only money, but also your time? Because that's what it's going to take, either you or a member of your team. And if that's not a commitment that you're willing to make, you're out. Like we've refused to work with some people because we ask them, they're like, yeah, let's go. And then we say, cool, get us this information. And then we have to follow up, and then we have to follow up, and then we have to follow up. So after the third time, I'm like, hey, when you're ready to take action, I'm not a babysitter. We're here to help you, and we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to help you achieve those results. But right now, you don't want it. Why did you say that? Oh, because we've asked you 3 times. Well, I'm busy. So are we. And we have other people that when we ask for stuff, they get it to us when we ask for it because they want to change their scenario. So if you're not willing to do the work, do that hard, boring work, you're not going to see the results. There is no magic pill for replacing the hard, boring work.
Yeah, you guys are only able to do the best jobs with the information that is given to you.
Correct.
You're not a mind reader.
As a failed marriage would tell me no. I tried, but It's no, and owning my part of it too. And that's what we've done in our firm is we've really designed from the ground up and said, where can we take accountability at every turn in the road? If the client is failing to deliver on something, are we doing our job to communicate to them? And my business partner this morning, he's beating me up over a process, and he's like, we can't over communicate. There's no such thing as over communicating to people. And I was like, you know what? You're right. We need to add some touch points or milestones in our process to where we're communicating with the client to keep them informed, to keep them in the loop. Absolutely right. We have to own our part to do that, and then request and hold our people that we serve accountable for that and say, okay, we've asked for this. We need you to engage. We promise we won't waste your time. Promise we won't waste your time, because your time can be spent better in other areas with your kids, your spouse, your business, God forbid your mental health, trying to stay, healthy as a person and a good member of this community and society.
Well, and I think that's amazing on what you guys are doing. You guys are definitely elevating that side of the game, because it's like you said, 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think that you guys are elevating the game. No one's really doing those touch points. They're just waiting to take in as much information as possible. And I think even Alex Hormozy said it. If you break down your processes in your own work, you do it better, and then you do it more, better, and then you go new.
Yep.
I think you guys are definitely living up to that expectation.
Well, and with all of this, again, I wanted to plug our newsletter. So maketaxesfair.com / how do you say your last name again?
Domondon.
Domondon. Thank you. So maketaxesfair.com / Domondon. So Brandon's last name. We're going to have that link live. So if you're a business owner and you need help and you want to get to know us, like I understand and tell people all the time, we're not a pizza. Tax strategy is not a pizza. You don't just wake up and be like, oh, I feel like pizza today. You want to know that you're working with people that know their stuff, that are reputable. I mean, you saw me speak at an event, and you're like, whoa, blew your mind. You're like, oh, that's the guy, right? He's giving me something that nobody else has given me. So that's the point of our tax strategy focus system. Make Taxes Fair / Domondon, and then people can sign up to get that monthly newsletter. With that monthly newsletter, you're also going to have an open office hour. So we're going to drop out the first week of the month, say, hey, here are the 2 things you need to do this month to optimize your taxes. Next week, we're going to have, following week, we're going to have an open office hour. It's a webinar format. You can dial in and say, hey, we're going to dissect those 2 things. So who here in the audience is taking action? Sweet. What roadblocks have you faced? Let's talk about some of the pitfalls of that strategy, right? Let's talk about some of the pitfalls of that you can avoid and how to implement and give you those clear and concise steps to execute. Because again, it goes back to the educate, evaluate, execute to obtain efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you guys want to see Chris back again, let us know.
Sweet.
Cool.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.